Hello there, my name's Gary, and I thought I'd go through the making of a recent track I did called Neo Designation, a sort of epic Berlin school odyssey which lasts, I think it's about 1 hour 20, I can't remember, but it's just, I've just put it up as an album on Bandcamp. So I had a couple of requests to do an update to my Berlin rig. I call it Berlin School, but the piece was actually playing with Jean-Michel Jarre, Vangelis style things, as well as the usual Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze type thing. So like I said, it's a bit of an update. I've done a couple of these before, just about basic technical side of things. I did a video about the flow, so how particularly I transition between different sections, because one of the key things with a long piece is that you can't just have it all at the same tempo. You can't have it obviously you've got to mix and match the musical themes and develop it and so on and so forth. I'll be going through that again, combined with a little bit of changes that I've made. I don't think I did it, for example, with the addition of the MicroFreak, some different effects, switching, and some changes to the layout. In fact, I'm not sure I even did it with the Moskwa, and it's sort of companion Ostankino, which are these two here, which is a much more, well, getting to later, but a much more sophisticated version of the Hikari, which I think was in previous videos. And I can't remember if I actually had the Wasp connected on previous videos either. Just gonna have a drink. It's absolutely freezing outside here, so it's nice to be in the warm with, because it's winter in Australia, so it's good to be in the warm with the fire going. Hopefully the fan heater's not being picked up on the microphone. I don't suppose it matters too much if it is. Anyway, let's get back to why we're here, which is to go through these various sections. I've got it all mapped out just to show you how organized I am. So I'll do these as chapters, obviously, on the video. We're going to do the layout for flow, just a little bit on that, mixers and FX section. A little reminder of the clocks, the dividers, and how the ratcheting works. And then I'm going to go through sort of very methodically or sequentially going through each of the sound sources and how they're sequenced. And then at the end, we'll do a whole sort of putting it together for performance. As in, I suppose some people are interested in how I do long form pieces and how everything works together. So just going from the layout perspective, obviously I've got two keyboards here, which are ideal for introducing melodic components and also to bounce off the sequences. Because I've got, effectively 3 sequences in here. I suppose 4 if you count chaos. So actually having human components makes a massive difference, with all the human frailty. So I introduced the MicroFreak because alongside the Keystep here, which is mostly controlling the Solina for pads, but it's also controlling the Pest for leads. I introduced the MicroFreak because I wanted some sort of richer pads, so that the two of them together really created quite a big sound. And so the MicroFreak is often in a sort of what I'd call a swelly brass type sound. It's actually a patch I made just using the Saw X type in the MicroFreak engine. One of the MicroFreak types, and I also use it for sequencing as well, so it's got its own built-in sequencer, which is, I suppose, a sequencer number 5, or in fact if you have this, sequencer number 6, so there's a lot of sequence opportunities. but it's generally used, like I said, for playing pads and solos, the two together. So that's quite important for me. In terms of the general layout, you know, this bottom right section here is very much the Moskwa controlling Taiga, particularly two oscillators on here, as one unit down the bottom, easy to get to. So if I'm playing things here, I can just sort of just jump up to these, change the notes in the sequence on the Moskwa, change the sounds on the Taiga and things like that. The Model D, again, it tends to be a not set and forget type sequence sound, but I like it up here just because it's the right hand. It's often, you know, it means I can play with one hand, left hand, or even do this thing. So I'm playing here and changing the sounds on the Model D up here. Likewise, I could be playing here and actually changing the sequence, excuse me, for the Model D. So this is the sequential 960 sequential controller controlling the Model D. So I can be changing notes while playing. So this is very much part of the thinking of this quite compact setup. I know, you know, some musicians with big setups tend to have keyboards strewn all around the room and they have to whiz up and down on wheels and things. I do like this sort of compactness. So, like I said, the sequential controller doing the Model D. The Solina is partly set and forget, which is again why I've got it at the top. You'll generally set the type of combinations of sounds, modulation and phasing, and then just sort of do a section of the piece, and then you'll go back and change it. So these are sort of intermittent changes. Things that change faster, I tended to put closer. So I do actually change the Taiga quite a lot on the Moskwa. Another thing I change a lot is the West Pest. And as we go through these in the sections, I'll show how they all work. But I've even got, you know, sort of things like adding the vibrato or adding an LFO to the folding. Having that close to hand, literally, so I can sort of play something down here and then even hold a note and be doing things up here. It's kind of nice having it close by, particularly as this often has the lead solo type duties, or it does a lot more than that. This whole middle section here is the much more complex area of the whole rack, and just to go through some of it. We got the ornament and crime, which is doing quantization of particularly the sequential controller, because that doesn't have built-in quantization. This is has got a built-in quantizer now, so I don't need to use the other channel of that. But on the other side of the ONC, I've got Euclid X, which is controlling the kick and one of the Pico drums, which is this little module here. So one side of it is also being controlled by that. The Chaos, which for those who, I've got a video on Chaos / marbles, has effectively 3 trigger clock things and also 3 note / sequency things. I'm like to be able to get to this one, that's why it's sort of open, which actually, before I sort of get into that, one of the reasons I like this rig is that I can just turn it on and go. For those who watch my other videos, the Mantis rack, which is much more complex, is very much, because it's complex, it's very much I have to patch from scratch each time normally. Apart from the output section, everything else is built. But this is normalized or pre-patched mostly. I occasionally do pull things in, like the Theremin. I don't know if you can see that on the video, but I've got 2 Theremins each side. So I often use, you know, some basic patching into pitches and things, but the rest of it is pretty locked down, which leads me to mention that, you know, I have these sort of rows of patch cables which open up certain parts of the modules, because you can't just have all the leads flopping over. So I've got access to all the notes in the Moskwa. Likewise, the reason I mentioned all of that was that I've got access to the Chaos There's no patch leads in the way. I've got access to brains, which is plates, clone, which has got lots of controls for different notes and things. And obviously the main one is mixing. So this mixing and effects section on the right here is all open and easy to get to in this middle row. The Taiga less critical. There's tuning at the top, but even if they're covered up, I can still get access to things like the waveforms and things like the LFOs and stuff. The other key, one of the most important parts, which you probably can't see from the camera at the top here, is the two clock dividers. So the main, I suppose this leads on to the next section actually, which I'll do out of order. Yeah, I'll do. No, sorry, I've just before I do the clocks, let me just do the finish this thought up. So this, as I said, this is the mixer. I've just introduced another 138S Doppler, which allows me to now do 8 channels in stereo, which I've been desperate to do because it's been limited in the past. It allows me to put the Model D, the Taiga, the Wasp, Pest, the Brains, Solina, MicroFreak, kick drum, percussion I'll call it, all in separate places in the stereo. And I've even got, you know, a few more free inputs here for things like external instruments. So it's basically level for each unit with a pan control, and super easy in performance to see where things are and also to adjust them. The FX, it was an NTS1, in fact that's quite a big change, an NTS1, which is a cheaper multi-effects unit, which I had sort of stamped on, plastered on here, it was sticking out. But now I've, on my other rack, I managed to free up a section and actually take the FX8 XL out. And I often have this in a dual mode. It's got lots of algorithms you can load onto it, but the dual one is basically delay into reverb. So the delay section is the top 2 knobs, and then this is the amount of reverb, and there's 2 different types on this control. So it gives me a bit of flexibility in stereo delay and reverb just from the one unit, which is kind of just really what the NTS1 was doing primarily. So that's the mixing and the FX section. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, the FX8 XL has got inputs for each of these, so I can actually use the LFOs, which I've got. I've got LFOs here, I've got them built into this. I could even take the LFO from the Taiga to adjust some of the FX levels and timings and things like that using an LFO, so that's kind of cool. The mix up here is also useful for balancing, so I can, for example, on this knob control this whole mixer level, which if you remember was the Model D, the Taiga, the Wasp, Pest and the Brains, which often is all the faster sequency stuff. So I can actually bring that whole section in on the one control here. Sorry, this one, the third one. This one's fixed, so this contains the pads and the drums. If the drums aren't playing, it means I can sort of have all the pads going, and if I put them on hold and things, I can then introduce this whole mixer using just this control. So that's a nice way of controlling that. Right, the clocks very quickly. There's, like I said, there's a whole video on that, and it hasn't changed too much, apart from the master is now bizarrely this, what I call the ratcheting sequencer. So if I press stop, everything stops. There's a little orange button here, start, stop. And the output clock from this goes into this first clock divider, which is situated here. And this clock divider is the 2 HP one, which has effectively 2 output clocks based on the input clock. So this first one is feeding a lot of instruments. It's effectively the same clock as this. So I don't know if you can see the 2 lights flashing. So that's a 1-to-1 clock, call it, and that's fed to literally everything else. The sequencers and chaos and things like that. Even these two are receiving the same clock. So they're all getting a one times clock. Unless I change it, I can actually just, on that master one here, turn the whole lot to 2 times clock, or half clock, or quarter clock, or whatever. The one underneath is what I call the envelope clock, and this actually is doing one thing only, sending to this second clock divider, which is controlling the envelopes for 2 main instruments. The top envelope is controlling the Model D, so it actually goes from here all the way up to the filter and the VCA envelope, or trigger if you like, on the Model D. The second one is controlling the clock of the Moskwa, which itself is controlling the envelopes of the Taiga. So hopefully that made some sense, but effectively there's one clock from this going into 4 clocks. The first one is being multed, a multed buffer, so it keeps it really strong. It's actually going to 6 different places as a copy of that first one to various things to keep everything locked together. The second one is going to this second clock divider, so it's like a translator, and I can actually do some clever things, like I said, with this second clock here. To, if I divide that, for example, it will change all the envelope clocks or this sequencer all at once, so it's good for doing subdivisions. So even though the sequencers carry on doing their 1 times, this can actually multiply and or divide the envelopes hitting them, so you can get sort of global ratcheting like that. And the other thing, oh yeah, the ratcheting side, I'll just discuss in this section before we get into the sounds and everything. So a 1 times clock is going to this 182 sequencer, which is doing nothing but controlling two lanes of the rates of this second clock divider. It'll make sense when you see it working, but that left lane here controls the envelope of VCA and filter up here, and allows me to do on various steps, 2 times ratchets, 3 times ratchets, all flowing as part of the piece. This second row, I've actually got it set to do the clock into the Moskwa. So what that means is if I turn one of these up, it will actually make this go faster temporarily just on that step. It allows me to create some quite complex type of syncopated sequences, and again I'll show you in a second. But the reason for that is I didn't want this whole thing to just be this sort of quite rigid constant sequencing thing. I wanted gaps, I wanted some complexity to some of the sequences, which is what that does. And so that's the ratcheting side. Like I said, because this is the master clock as well, there's a tiny little tempo knob hidden at the top here, and literally the whole rack is adjusted by this tempo. And occasionally in performance I'll suddenly go, right, I've had enough of this fast stuff, let's go super slow, and I can just turn the tempo down and the whole rack slows down. It's all kept perfectly in sync just from this one knob, which is a great sort of powerful thing. It's not the best one. On the NTS one I was able to actually choose BPMs, so this one is very much by ear, which is not a bad thing. BPMs can be prescriptive sometimes, if that makes sense, so that you're creating a piece and then you suddenly go, oh, I've been at 128 for a few minutes, let's go down to 102 for whatever reason, so you actually dial it in. That's not, to me, the most organic way of doing it. I like to actually do it by ear, so you're going, right, what's a nice feel now, tempo-wise, so that's why it's there. Okay, let's go into individual instruments and the routing and the sequencing. The first one is the Model D, which I've been through this quite a lot. I can't remember if I had the switching all patched in on one of the talk-throughs, so I'll go through that. This sequential switch is like a separate module that you often buy with this. So this is the Model D, and you can hear it was slightly out of sync there, so I've actually that's one of the things I can do with these clocks, is just make sure that the trigger and the envelope, which are on separate clocks here, are actually locked in. So here's the sequential controller. Without just going into that too much detail, the Model D is great. I've got various ways of controlling the oscillators, 3 oscillators to play with. I can actually just switch the oscillators on and off. I can fade them up, so I can have different mixes. It's good to fade them up sometimes. Usually there, which is another thing with the flow thing that you'll see later, I do like to adjust the volumes on the instruments rather than divorcing that from, sorry, if you know, I'm thinking, right, I'm going to do the Model D, and then I have to think, right, where is it on the mixer? Now I can just go, all right, I want to do the Model D, and immediately just bring it in from up here. So I've got control over the 3 oscillators, and obviously the pitch of all the oscillators. I can obviously control the filters. I've got an LFO that I can do the filtering on. And the sequencing, and like I said, I could be playing I'll just tune it up actually, because it's the joy of analog synths. The joy of analog synths is they heat up, so I've had this fan heater on for a while, so when you're doing a performance you generally get the environment, how it's going to be, and then you start your recording. So I've just got the Solina on channel 1 here, and the Model D up here. But basically what I'm saying, forget the Solina for a minute, let's just have that in the background. When I'm playing things on here, or even here, I can adjust the notes quite easily, so it's pretty cool. Introduce different notes. I can have you know, a range of notes preset at various steps, and just bring them in. I can switch between, like in this case, 3 notes to go to 4 steps, 5 steps. And sometimes you'll see me in performances do what I call changing one note, so the sequence feels like it's much longer. Like I said, the Ornament Crime is doing a C Aeolian scale here, which is effectively C minor. What I generally do with the sequencer is sort of do it mostly manual on one row, but sometimes I'll switch if I you know, want to go to a different sequence. I can just press the second row here, and I can actually switch between them. And even the third row. This is good, for example, let's say I wanted to just like a low sequence, so I could actually set 2 in advance. And then, you know, be playing around with this top row. Let's put a bit of delay on. Second oscillator. And then go, right, I need a bit of a breakdown, and I can't leave this running, but I still want that sequence in there, so I can just go, right, let's do just C notes. And then after a sort of where I'm developing something else, I can just go back to the sequence. I could even do it so that as I press this, I bring in a kick. So it's nice to have these switches between the 3 rows. You can also set it so that when it gets to the first trigger, you take an output here and just patch it into the shift here, and what it will do is it will auto step between them, so you can actually create much longer sequences, which I don't tend to do, because the longer ones it's a little harder to sort of keep track of when you've got a lot of other things happening in a piece. So like I said, it's just generally hard switching. And that's what these different colored leads are for. It's just basically orange is row 1, red is row 2, green is row 3, going into the switcher. I think I've covered other things on the Model D, so I won't... I've covered lots of other things about the Model D on other videos, so I'll skip that for the moment. The next main one is the Taiga and the Moskwa sequencer. So the Taiga is again 3 oscillators, and at its very basic level I'm using 2 of them sequenced from the Moskwa. The Taiga is very much a sort of East Coast feel. West Coast. So the Model D is like East Coast, this is more West Coast. More of that folding FM feel. And that's being sequenced from the Moskwa. And the Moskwa, similar situation, I can do it to 2 steps, 3 steps. I've got control over the number of steps. Let's go to 5. And like I said, this is running quite slow at the moment. It's doing a sort of polymeter thing. And I've got control over the rate of the sequencer itself with this one. And you can hear I'm manually turning clock 4 here, the rate. It allows me to do some manual changes. This is oscillator 2 only, by the way. And then I've got control over the envelopes and filters of the Taiga. They're a bit fiddly. The Taiga's got a bit of a issue that the rotary controls here, it's only like the first 5% of them that make quite a massive difference, so I'm often just doing these tiny little movements on both the decay and the release to get that sort of more chirpy sound. And I'll slow that down again. So the third oscillator is also connected to the Moskwa. There's an octave lower, so it's a way of building the intensity or the gravitas, if you like, of the sequence. And likewise, as I said on the Moskwa with this one, I often play around with the notes. There's a nice touch on the Moskwa, which is quite a complex sequencer compared with the Hikari, especially when you introduce some of the patching that you can do on this expander module. But just on the range, there's a range control here, so I can go from very low combinations of notes, sort of lower down, and then increasing the range is just going to expand the notes it chooses in the preset scales. And again, it's in a performance situation, it's a great way of, gradually increasing the scale of a section by increasing the range of the sequence, rather than it being small. Let's go to 5 steps. And I'll show you the ratcheting, which I didn't cover on the Model D. I'll do that in a second. I'll just quickly reverse engineer that. So on the ratcheting lane here, when I put one of them up, it's temporarily increasing the rate of clock 4, which is this one. can hear what it's doing there. It's actually because it's doubling up two of the notes. It's actually bringing it in time with the 4/4 one, this very slow bass drum. I'll go through that in a second. So that's the rate, and I can choose some very fast rates so that it's like suddenly a really fast increase. It almost sounds glitchy. And you get some lovely syncopated things when you stop and start these. So I'm just fiddling around the ratchets. There's 4 steps here at the moment, so on a 5-step sequence. It creates some nice counter things. I'll actually do it on the Model D just to show the ratcheting. This is traditional ratcheting. So on step 3 here, I'm just going to have a double ratchet. And because this is a 5-step sequence, you can hear it's sort of changing the position of the ratchet through this sequence. I'll put a triple one on the first step. And so on. I can just turn those on and off in a performance. So when I'm starting pretty small like that, perhaps just on one oscillator, I can just slowly increase the complexity just by adding a double ratchet. 3 steps to 5 steps, increasing more steps and so on. So a combination of increasing the number of steps, increasing the ratcheting is just another way of slowly building a section, which if you've seen any of my videos you know what that is. So that's the Taiga and the Model D, so 1 and 2. Let's go on to the Pest. Right, so this has got a few options. One of the basic ones, I'll just turn Solina off, is that this pitch and CV is going, pitch and gate is going to the Pest. And you can hear I can turn the volume up of the Pest. Just make sure it's set up right. So it's got a range of tones, but like I said, when I suddenly want to go into solo mode, rather than adjusting the volume here on number 3, channel 3, I can actually do the volume actually on the Pest itself, which is great. You know, let's say for example, I have got a bit of a pad going. I can then suddenly introduce the Pest. I can change the sounds of the Pest. There's even a noise there, which I've occasionally used. And the folding, the LFO folding, it's kind of nice. I'll just turn the Solina off again, sorry. Just so you're only listening to Pest. I'll leave the kick just going as a basic pulse in the background. You're getting a little, the LFO fold on the fold is producing that sort of coming in and outness. I can turn that off just by changing the depth. One of the most important things when you're doing a solo is the vibrato on the FM modulation here, which is coming from this LFO. So I've got control, there's 4 LFOs here. I can control the speed and so on, and the depth here. I can bring in the glide, and it's so nice just having it here because I could be and even though I'm holding like a 2-note chord here, I can still like introduce the fold mod. So so it's good to have the two together. I can also, you've probably seen in the performance, I can also pull out the MicroFreak and the Keystep to do any changes to like the divisions of the internal sequencers, or in this case on the MicroFreak to actually change the release. So if I want, for example, that to just be a longer, I can just pull it out, set it to a longer release and sustain. That allows me then to sort of have a solo going. And sort of play a chord, do some fiddling here, play a chord, and so on. The other thing with the West Pest, I have got patch leads that are going through here, so I can actually do some sequences from the clocks into here, just as dedicated ones. Although what I tend to do more often is use the Keystep sequencer, and this is where this little switch comes in. So I've got a four-way switch, or four switches here effectively. So the Keystep, as you can see, is monophonic, because the West Pest is a monophonic West Coast type thing. Let's just have really basic. There we go. If I want to introduce or to use the Keystep as a sequencer, I just need to put the hold on and then just press this switch which sends the clock through to the Keystep. So I can go from to suddenly remember you're listening to the West Pest here. And the nice thing with this is I can go to, you know, these sort of low throbby things. Let's increase the just the regularity of the kick. A bit syncopated. And I've got it in last step mode usually, so what that means is the last note will be added to the sequence. So you can actually build a sequence. Everyone knows this, they've got a key step. So I'll just add the G, add the F, and an E flat. If you do a balls up like that, then you're kind of a bit stuck, so you have to restart it. The thing with the long performances is try not to do any bum notes. And you can put some automation on the sound, of course. And just by switching this out of clock going to it, you can just suddenly go back to you know, much more of a solo sound again. Right, so that's the West Pest. I think there's other things in here which I've covered in the past. Brains is on channel 4 here. Brains is mostly controlled, so I haven't got any manual things into Brains or plates. It's coming from the Chaos, and as you know with Chaos marbles, let's just turn it up. So this has got a clock going in, and you can divide the clock in Chaos itself. So I often have it on quite a slow divider because it can generate quite busy things. The trigger for Brains and the notes are both going into Brains here, along with some LFOs. I'll go in a second. But it allows me, for example, to have quite a a basic sequence going on the Model D, like, you know, like one of the main ones. And then I can introduce Brains as much more complexity, so there's sort of this vibraphony sound. And from Chaos, I can just, for example, increase the note choices. using the steps control here, and then the shape itself, or the range, I think. Basically the spread of the notes. I think it's called spread actually, you can hardly see it. So it adds a nice counterpoint to like a manual sequencer. You can still be doing changes on the main sequence. And then brains, you can just be playing other things here and just go, right, I want it to be much more complex, just by and then turn up the clock divider. And it can start to do some really interesting syncopation, because the T3, one of the clocks here, trigger 3 rather, triggers, is controlled by this bias. So I can actually just turn up this bias and it will start to do some crazy jazzy improvisational things. Likewise brains, these two work together in my view in this particular rig. I can change things like the timbre. I can change the octave just with a long press and a turn of a knob. I can also change the envelope of the part. I can actually do this with one hand, but I'm just doing this for now. So you can see you can get it going quite crazy, or you can bring it back to something much more uniform quite quickly as well. I've got LFOs going into brains, so the morphing, which changes the colour of the sound. I can turn up the LFO, so there's an attenuator on the LFO input, which allows me to control the morphing, because you can get quite nice effects on the morphing. I've also got it going into the harmonics. Also during performance, I can be playing down here. And then go, I want to, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So I could be playing down here and change the sounds very easily. I could even use the, I think there's a super saw in here. A bit more sustain on it. Let's change the octave. Okay, so that's those two. Again, I've done videos on that. One of the triggers is going to the percussion as well. Let's just turn Model D off. Then we're on to the Solina, which is controlled from the Keystep. I need to turn it up, turn the Pest off. So Solina. The other thing that kicks in with a lot of this is muscle memory as well. So I just turn the Pest off, immediately went to that, turn it off, because that's where the Pest is, turn it down I mean. And then the Solina, right, I need to turn that on, so we'll just... So these are the raw waveforms without any effects for Solina, which I sometimes start with. For example, I'll switch into arpeggiator mode, perhaps something slower, and this is where this controller comes in. So when I turn on the hold, so it's quite a nice start to a piece. It might just be a couple of notes, 4 notes like that. I've got the control over the volume obviously there and here, but I mostly use this one in this case. And then I've got the filter up here, which is also level control, so I can actually control the level in 3 places with this one. This is where the Wasp filter comes in, because even on that really quite horrible dry version of the Solina, it really comes alive with the phasal and the modulation. But even on that one, with a bit of resonance added, you can create some nice nice effects. And I've got an LFO going in here as well, so let's get the LFO working on it. And that's usually a nice sort of background. Obviously, when you've got like reverb, and as the frequency gets LFO'd in, it's going to create this lovely wash of sound, which works very well with these big, brassy sort of aftertouch things. I didn't talk about the aftertouch. One of the nice things with the MicroFreak is, of course, I can tap the keys and then press harder and get swells just off the angle of the finger. The more finger that touches them, the louder they get. And all the time, this is just left doing its thing. When I want to make the Solina bigger, I often obviously kick in like the modulation, which is the big pad sounds, which don't really work on the arpeggiated, so I'll just turn the arpeggiator off, one click, and then I'm into manual chords, and then I can just hit modulation, suddenly gets really big. The familiar sound, I'll make the resonance less and it becomes more familiar now. Sorry about the kick drum, it's just there as a reference. In fact, I need to turn it to a bit more regular. It's on 32/15 Euclidean at the moment, which is not great. And all the time I can just be doing stuff down here and just quickly whiz up, turn things on and off. Let's just have the high phaser version. Just suddenly go into like a organ-y type thing. I've still got the CV with the attenuator on here. If I want more extreme movement, and I've got the LFO rate. Actually, I forgot to mention the LFO is coming from the Model D in this case, so I can do some clever things like that if I wanted. And the reason it's there is because rather than having it off this LFO or off the Taiga, is that literally right next to this one, which means I can be playing with, you know, some sequences going and stuff. I can also even have the LFO going without affecting the Model D. So here's the Model D sequence. If I take the mod depth down here, the LFO rate will affect the Solina, but not the Model D. It'd be great to have some synchronized LFOs. I haven't really got that set up, but that'll be probably the next step. That's basically where a clock is triggering the LFO, so you can do divisions of LFOs. So when I was doing that sweep in the LFO there, this one, it would actually drop it back into tempo, so you'd hear it in time with the drums, and as I turn it up, you'd get a divided one. I could probably do it somehow, but I kind of do it a lot on the more sophisticated modular rig I've got. Right, I think that's the Solina. We're up to the MicroFreak. What was I saying else? Nothing else about the Solina, I don't think. It's pretty basic pad sound. So the MicroFreak is, like I said, doing several duties. One of them is, I'll turn the kick off for this. I do love the this sort of Vangelis pad sound, which also works with that aftertouch feel. Well, it is an aftertouch. I'll just reset the preset because I fiddled around with it. So that's, you can get really big sounds out of it that way. Of course, it works really well with a nice soft non-LFO'd Solina. And again, if the Solina's getting in the way of sounds, I can just, even with no resonance on, just knock the filter off, so it's a much more, it's still got the size with the modulation and even the phasing, but without that top end, which can often just swamp a piece. I can find that with the Solina, it can really just end up being the main event when really you want it in the background. You can go very quiet with it. That way, when you play the MicroFreak, it's got some room to breathe. So that's one of the things, that double of the paddy thing. You can get some big sounds. But I also use it in for sequencing as well. So I've got several presets that I've set up that I've got the ARP going. So as soon as I press it, it's using the clock of everything else just to show you it's in time. And you've got the range, the octaves. If you put the hold on, you've suddenly got something you can just set and forget kind of thing, and then you might go, oh, let's bring in the West Pest. So that's kind of, there's not much else with the MicroFreak. It's, you know, it's a law unto itself. It's a shame that I have to pull the whole thing out to change the settings, the presets, or to do any minor adjustments to the envelopes and the filters and things, or particularly the divisions. So in this case, for example, I can divide. Let's find another sound, because that one's a bit of a soft one. I think is that one. Yeah, I think that's... no, let's just go back to that for the moment. Put it on hold. I've got control of the envelope. At least the envelopes here are kind of cool. I can just... filters, I have to pull it out a bit more to do more filtery things. Off. I've got the my monitoring really low so that you can hear my voice and I can mix it later. Anyway, sorry, the other reason for pulling it out is I can do divisions, so I can just about see time division there. There's no way of MicroFreak knowing what's the start of bar, for example. So a lot of the time, if you want to bring it into sync, you often have to sort of go up and down a bit on the time division to sort of get it locked in. So that one, for example, is offbeat. If I want that more on-beat, I sort of just, you know, go up and down, and then eventually I can get it more locked in. Oh, sorry, I think I've gone too far, too slow there. Where have you gone? Like that. The trouble is the more useful ones are in a very small range, so sometimes you go you turn the knob too far and it suddenly it's in 64s or something, and it's hard to control, and then if you go too far the other way it goes down to really slow. So that's kind of cool. You can sort, I mean, part of it's happy accidents with this kind of thing. Like that's an offbeat, which could keep going forever, and I could. And that's often when you're doing a longer piece, those sort of happy accidents, you know, dictate the next section. Likewise, you could go, I like the offbeat, but it's the kick's going too fast. So I actually changed the Euclidean on the kick there, so it comes in and out of time, as you'll hear. Anyway, so that the MicroFreak, like I said, with its built-in sequencer is really cool for doing that sort of stuff. Not sure everything's still running. I'm just going to do a quick check. Right, it looks like everything's still running. It's always annoying after you do a video and then I just like to do them in one continuous take. The problem with that is if the battery runs out or the storage runs out, whatever it is, you can end up losing the whole thing or losing a large section. Where are we up to? MicroFreak, kick. Okay, the kick's easy, and I've done this before. It's the Tip-Top BDO 808, which I like because it's got everything from like a clicky, very top-end type kick to you can go very thuddy and long as well. I'm going to delay on just a bit of reverb at the moment, and the volumes here, which I often just preset and change the level here, and it's on, like you saw, the Euclid X, so I've got it on this top channel, so it's on a straight 4 at the moment, and that's kind of it. Level, triggers, and then overall volume if I need to adjust it. Likewise, off this Euclid X, the second channel coming out here is going into the Pico drums. So we've got, I think, some hi-hats, a bit of a Euclidean hi-hat thing. If you know the Pico drums, it's a 2-channel effectively drum sampler, so you can store 2 different sounds. I'll go into the next one in a sec, which allows me to adjust the pitch. I'll start from some super high hi-hats and then go into more cymbally type ones. I can do that on the pitch. Also the length, very short ones through to much longer, the full length of the sample. And then the volume, as before, I've got it here. It's actually on channel 8, the 8th one of this mixer, but I can do the volume from here, which is super easy. And again, the triggers, I actually have to, you know, use the ornament and crime here. So if I want more hi-hats, I can just increase it there. If I go to 16/15, it'll just leave a gap every now and then, which is cool because it just makes it a bit more interesting rather than just constantly going. The other thing about the Pico drum is you can put an LFO in, which in this case is controlling the selection of the sample of one of the sample channels here. So maybe there's 2 channels really. So this is controlling which one's playing, and it's on a LFO at the moment, quite a fastish one, I think. Just turn it down a bit. And the trigger for that is coming from T1 of Chaos. So it's not coming from this one, it's coming from here, which allows me to produce some pretty wacky percussion sounds. I'll turn off the hi-hat and then we'll just listen to that, and you probably heard it on some of the pieces. So what we got going on here is quite a slow trigger from Chaos, because I've turned the rate down of this one. If I want it to be a bit more hectic, I can turn the rate up, so we're getting more hits of these random samples in the 64, so it's going through 64 samples very quickly, and the trigger's just going to hit 1 or 2 of them. If we go really fast, and then if we increase the bias, we start to get these subdivisions within each of these, which goes absolutely bonkers. And this works quite nicely with when the brains is doing something, because you've got a complement on the bias. So when this goes crazy, this is much less crazy on on the brains. So all you're hearing there, if I turn the kick off, is just 1 channel of the Pico drums and brains. So that's another reason for panning. I often put, for example, brains on one side of the stereo and this Pico drums on the other side. That's brains. I think we're done. Theremins, right. So on each side here, again, we've got a whole video on these. The Theremins, I can play them as real Theremins if you've ever seen me on my main channel, actually playing proper tunes using a proper Theremin. You can get some interesting, quite close things. These are not meant... Which one can you see? I don't know. These are not meant really to be super good linearity of field. They're kind of meant to be more effects. So I'd often, you know, grab one of the patch leads and like chuck it into one of the filter changes. Sometimes I'll put it into the pitch of the Wasp Pest. I might put it into the filter of the Taiga. Might use it to affect one of the brains things. So there's a few options. In fact, I've actually done it on the Solina a couple of times on the phaser in, so it controls the rate of the phaser. So there's lots of options, and it really is when I'm performing just a bit of what takes my fancy. I'll go, right, I want to do something a bit more manual apart from these and changing notes of sequences on the fly. And I'll suddenly go, right, let's take the pitch of this right theremin, throw it into the Wasp Pest, and actually do some playing. Once you get this offset working on the theremin, there's a little control here which effectively sets the length of the field, how much you can affect it by the distance. That's a sort of nice, quick way of doing it. So they're really nice to have as an extra controller. So let's put it all together now, and I'll talk through the process. Obviously, when I approach a long form piece, before I do this section, obviously before I do a long piece, there's usually a start, but I'm not got a structure in my head of where it's going to go. It's often happy accident, so I'll sort of finish a section, and then I'll break it down a bit, take a few things out, and then I'll go, right, I'm going to change one of them. It might be a clock, it might be a one of the sequences to something much longer or shorter, and then gradually add things back in again. And that's kind of what I do. So often I might start, for example, with something like, you know, some nice pads, something a bit mysterious perhaps, abstract, and then start to introduce a rhythmic element. And one of the things I didn't mention is that the pitch from here is also feeding oscillator 1 of the Taiga. I've covered it in previous videos, but what that allows me to do is, so this is duplicating. That duplication is super important, as you probably saw with this one controlling the Solina and the Wasp Pest. It allows me to do effectively 4 things. So I've got 4 things going here. Wasp Pest and Solina on the right, and then oscillator 1 and MicroFreak on the left. And I'll often do that as a build-in. It's a good way of getting everything balanced. And because this is being sequenced, I could introduce something a bit more disjointed to the oscillator 1 here. I could potentially take this into a sequence, which in fact I'll do some of these things. So what you're hearing there is the oscillator 1 plus this sound. The MicroFreak is quite low usually, so I have to do a bit of balancing. So you've got oscillator 1 on the Taiga, and then MicroFreak playing together. And I can change these. And this is where, you know, I might bring in the Model D. I usually fade them in rather than switching. I often have these switches all on, and then I'd tuning again. I've just recalibrated the Model D, so it's behaving a bit better now. All the time as well, while this is going on, I'll be playing either the Solina or the lead sound on here. I could introduce some rhythmic elements by turning up the crazy one on here at a very slow rate. Just getting a bit sort of ethnic sounding. So introducing these rhythmic elements, then slowly developing the main sequence, perhaps on a much stronger Solina pad. I haven't got any effects going yet. I'd often have like the delays going, and definitely some bigger reverbs. All the time, you know, I'm listening, and that's the thing about improvisation. You're listening, going, okay, what's working, what isn't, and you do more of some of the stuff that you think is working at the time, and that's just part of the evolution. And you also get to feel when things should be introduced. So if you want more of a constant hi-hat sound, just to start to glue things together. Get rid of the crazy sounds for the moment. And then you might sort of sanitize one of the sequences. So I've just turned this to one note now. So this is the MicroFreak and this one. And then I could start to introduce another sequence. So I'm just bringing in the Taiga and some extra steps on the Model D. Time for the kick. Sanitize. I say sanitize, let's make it less reverb in this case. And then you sort of start to build the groove up, add a few more steps, increase the depth of some of the sequences, the Taiga as well. And all the time you're thinking, is it getting too big? Is it too small? How can I take the listener on a ride? Because it's storytelling as well, of course. Increasing the complexity might be increasing the kick into something actually more usable. It's sometimes hard to see the divisions here on the Euclid. So, and then from this point you might go, right, let's just go to something much more. Tangerine Dreamy, but something a bit more lower key that you can build up from, add a few ratchets, because you're going to introduce some extra elements. And this is where the switching can come in. As a breakdown, increase the click of the kick. And then you're into another section. All the time I'll be doing things on the keyboards as well, but sometimes it's nice just to go full breakdown mode. This could be get the Moskwa going in one note, and I could play the Moskwa on one note. I do this a lot on the SQ1s. So even though I'm not playing a keyboard, I'm still playing melodies on one note of a sequencer on a one-step loop. You could introduce it as a two-step loop and have a counterpoint type thing. And again, if you know the notes, you could actually echo this, which I've done a lot now. So I'm changing the note here and also finding the same note on the Solina, turn the Solina down a touch. sense if I just have one note. So you can play with that. And this could be another build-up. As you build up, you know, you go back to the main sequence. The good thing of having these rows on these switches is that you can have effectively a recapitulation. So further in, you know, you might have something like that. Let's just go. So the Taiga in this case is doing one note from here on oscillator 1, and then I've got another note from the Moskwa. What was I saying? Yeah, you could go from this very sort of single note sequence coming from the Model D as a bed, perhaps with a touch of hi-hat. I'll turn the regularity of the hi-hats down, something like that, and change a few notes every now and then. Remember, this is duplicating to the Taiga. It's sometimes nice to have discordant elements. So I know this is on a B flat, so you can start to think of musical combinations. And you're sort of starting to think of chordal things. Just happy accidents like that. I didn't know I settled on a B flat here, but we could go from a going to minor. That type of thing. Sorry, I'm actually doing a piece here. I didn't want to do that. It was more about, I suppose, the thought processes as you break down things, build things up again, reduce complexity, take things back to pretty basic, you know, skeletal type things, introduce new elements to take you into new parts. So we've gone into the brains here, and a lot of happy accidents also come from just randomly choosing things rather than being very prescriptive about, oh, I want to go to that waveform now, which is, it's often sometimes nice to just choose something at random and then live with it. Go with the flow type thing. So I'm going to do a bit of jazzy improvisation on Chaos and Brains here. And because you've got this throbbing underbed, whatever you do on the top here is sort of will not always work, but because it's in time, you're sort of off to a good start. Make it a bit higher, so it's not fighting sonically. That's another thing you're thinking about when you're doing the piece. Sorry, I just realised my hand is going to be in the shot. Sonically, you're thinking, right, what's in the sub areas? Got the Model D doing the lower end, and obviously the kick. This is often in the middle, like the Solina. And then you go, right, I need something higher over the top. We've obviously got the hi-hats. So let's have this much more higher frequency in the balance sonically. From a spectrum, I mean sonically, I mean from a spectrum perspective, frequency ranges and so on. All the time while that, like the Chaos and Brains is doing its thing, I can be thinking, right, I've got this Moskwa freed up now, it's not actually playing anything, so I'm going to actually choose a nice 4-note sequence, which I can't hear, I can't actually preview it, that's part of the problem sometimes. So I'm just going to trust my gut that I can see the light flashing now, so that's the only preview. I don't know if you can on the camera, but I can see a clock light, which is the tempo of this, it's just echoing here. So now I can replace the chaos with a new sequence. I'm not sure what it'll be. And you can see that's running a polymeter, so it's on the dotted eighths type thing. That way we can get rid of the rhythm, so we lose the sense of the 4/4. We've still got the Model D doing the 4/4 rhythm, and we can slowly add extra notes to that. So then we've got this polyrhythm going. Lost its volume, I think because I'm monitoring very low because of the mic, I can actually hear the balances as well as I normally do. And then you can get rid of that one, and then all of a sudden you're into a new piece. Introduce just a little extra step on this one, so it speeds up temporarily. Throws people a bit, which is unexpected, so it's always nice to have the ability to throw unexpected elements in, because there's nothing worse than one sequence going for 10 minutes without any variations, I think. So just add an extra step as well. Really high note. And that's a sort of diversion. You could play around with Chaos and Brains, just adding a bit of counterpoint to this. Lower octave. I suppose this is in the bracket of chaotic breakdown. This is where you would add extra chaos on the percussion. That then opens you up to introduce, like another main sequence. I could go to 3 on here, which is another sequence, starting it from scratch. And then at the same time, I'm going to introduce, so all these oscillators are up, I'm going to turn up Model D, the whole thing, and also turn up the kick. So all of a sudden we get this, almost like a crossfade of another piece. And then, as you would do, you would fade out the other stuff. You could do it on the instrument itself. Get rid of the brains. And then we're suddenly into another piece. Introduce perhaps a solo to... So I'm going to pull back to just the Model D in this case. Now this is on this bottom row. Sometimes with these sequences, in this case it might have made sense. To have some of these preset in a piece. I mean, that's obviously what professional performers, Tangerine Dream and so on would do. They would have a lot of these presets, so they could just bring them in. We've got a bit of an issue with the delay speed there. There we go. Not quite sure what happened. Then you can just play around with that. We can go right back to the hi-hat, to just that, and have a bit more colour in this sound. Sequence. So sometimes if you start fiddling with the sequence notes on each step, you can end up with something not great. So you'd often, as you're playing other things, be doing minor adjustments to some of the steps, just to get something that's got a bit more repetitive ability. There's a new word. The ability for it to loop and be nice to listen to. Something kind kind of obvious. Increase the drum kick. And then we're into another section again. Reintroduce the slightly offbeat Taiga. So it's always nice to have this doubling up all the time. So, excuse me, the sort of brassy Vangelis sound of this. And then this rhythmic element which glues it to sort of the sequence because it's perfectly in tempo with it. Did I change my speaking voice to match the note then? Weird. Sometimes, you know, you don't leave things in, you just use it as a break. So when you're playing a melody, a sustained note, just add something to decorate the gap, which I'm using here as the sequence from Moskwa. Get rid of that, carry on the melody. Might be brains this time. Back to the melody. Right, I could do this for days, just explaining kind of what I'm doing, which I haven't got time for. It was primarily to sort of talk through my process, everything from why the gear I'm using, how it's developed. I suppose I should talk about the future. I'm thinking of getting the Behringer 2XM, which is going to sit here, which is the Oberheim, much fatter, bigger sound. I'm still deciding whether it's going to replace the Taiga or the Model D, because there's some attraction in having two East Coast big sequencers if I want to do the old school stuff. But it's nice to have this West Coast element in as well. So it's a tough decision. I've got room for it anyway. It's an 80 HP thing, so it's about that long. So that'll be an interesting addition. I think they're coming out in July or August here, probably August. So that'll be a nice change. I've had the Model D now since 2019, I think, 18. So it's coming up to 7-8 years. It still works perfectly. I have to calibrate it every now and then, but it's a great little thing. All right, so thank you for that. Any questions? And I probably missed a couple of things, but just ask. All right, thank you.